Hungarian Folk Tales. The Little Pig and the Wolves. Once upon a time, there was a little pig who lived in a little house in the middle of a vast forest. The little pig was cooking supper one day when a scruffy wolf knocked on his door. Little pig, let me in. It's so cold out here, I'll freeze to death. No, I won't let you in because you'll eat me up. Just let my back leg in or I'll freeze to death. The little pig put a big pot of water to boil on the fire, and then he let the wolf's back leg into the house. Oh, little pig, please let my other back leg in too. Little pig, please let my 2 front feet in now. The little pig let the wolf's 2 front feet in, but the scruffy wolf still wasn't happy. Little pig, please let all of me in, and I promise I won't hurt a hair on your head. The little pig found a sack and held it open so that the wolf would walk right into it. And that's what he did. The little pig wasted no time and tied the sack up in a flash. Then he took the pot off the fire and poured boiling water all over the wolf. The steaming hot water made the wolf shout, and he wriggled and jiggled until he pushed the sack open. The bold, scolded wolf jumped out of the sack and saw the little pig sitting at the top of the tree. And the wolf ran off to find help. The bold, scolded wolf eventually returned with the other wolves. The wolves thought and thought about how they would catch the little pig, as none of them could climb a tree. At long last, they decided to stand on one another's shoulders until they reached the little pig. The wolves climbed quickly one on top of the other. The bold, scolded wolf stayed at the bottom because he was afraid of heights, so the others all climbed on top of him. The Tower of Wolves reached up to the sky until they only needed one more wolf on the top. The last wolf started to climb, and the little pig shouted, "Pour hot water on the bold one!" The bold, scolded wolf leapt out from the bottom of the pile and ran as fast as his legs could carry him. The wolves tumbled to the ground in a heap of furry bones. Then all the little piglet had to do was to jump down from the tree and go back into his little house. And the bad wolves never dared come near again. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Pussycat Princess. Once upon a time there lived a king, and the king had 3 sons. All 3 princes were of marrying age, and so their father told them to find themselves wives. He threw 3 sticks in the air, 1 for each son, and said, "Wherever your stick falls is where you find your bride." The eldest son's stick fell towards a young baroness. The middle son's stick fell towards a young countess, while the youngest son's stick fell towards the dark forest. The young men all left the palace, but the youngest one was very sad. He had no idea how he would find a bride in the thick forest. And as he was walking in the forest, he met a small pussycat that walked behind him. The young prince spoke to the pussycat and said, "My royal father told me to travel to these parts where I would find my bride, but I can't see a girl anywhere near. Don't worry, I will marry you." The prince could not return home until he promised to marry the pussycat. The other princes had already arrived back, and their father asked them each what they thought of their bride. The eldest one said that he found a baroness, and the middle son said that he found a countess, while the youngest one asked them to wait and see. Then the king ordered all the 3 grooms to fetch a beautiful bouquet from their beloved. The 2 elder ones went happily, but the youngest one was very sad. When he reached the edge of the forest, the pussycat was already waiting for him. "My dear betrothed, you look so unhappy. Tell me, why are you so sad?" "How wouldn't I be sad when my royal father has ordered us all to bring a bouquet from our fiancés? Now what could I bring from a pussycat?" "Don't worry, just lie down and take a rest." Then the pussycat scratched a tree and many more pussycats appeared. One of them brought silver flowers, another golden flowers, and a third brought diamond flowers, and the bride arranged them all in a beautiful bouquet. The other 2 princes were already at home when the young prince arrived late. The king said that the bouquets were truly beautiful, but the most beautiful of all belonged to the youngest son. They all asked him to tell the name of his bride to be, but he asked them to wait and see. Days passed and soon became a week when the king ordered his sons to go to their brides and fetch a handkerchief each. The young princes all left, but the youngest one was very sad. By the time he reached the edge of the forest, the pussycat was already waiting for him. "My dear betrothed, you look so unhappy. Tell me, why are you so sad?" "How wouldn't I be sad when my royal father has ordered us all to bring a handkerchief from our fiancés? But a pussycat cannot weave." "Don't worry, just lie down and take a rest." The pussycat scratched the tree, and once again more pussycats appeared. One brought silver yarn, another brought golden yarn, and a third gave diamond yarn, and the pussycat bride wove them together. When he arrived at the palace, the king inspected all 3 handkerchiefs. He told the eldest boys that theirs were quite pretty, but he told the youngest son that his was the prettiest of all. Weeks passed and soon became a month when the king told his sons to bring their fiancées to the palace. The 2 elder boys went happily for their spouses, while the youngest one became sadder than ever before. How could he possibly take the pussycat home? His pussycat bride was already waiting for him at the edge of the forest. "My dear betrothed, you look so unhappy. Tell me, why are you so sad?" "How wouldn't I be sad when my royal father has ordered us all to fetch our brides? Now how can I present a pussycat at the palace?" "Don't worry, just lie down and take a rest." The youngest prince thought he would never sleep, but at last he succumbed and fell into a slumber. When he awoke, he was very worried, but the young princess told him it was she in the guise of a pussycat whom he had betrothed, but she had been under a curse to live like that until a young man asked for her hand in marriage. "I was a pussycat, and you asked me to marry you, so I turned back into a princess." A wonderful coach awaited them, with proud coachmen and fine horses, so the prince sat in the carriage with his princess and travelled back to the palace in regal style. The wedding party was already underway at the palace when the guards came to the king and told him that a king had arrived from another country. When the young couple arrived, the king soon saw that they were his son and his beautiful bride. They were all amazed to discover that the youngest prince's bride was the most beautiful of them all. Then they all sang and danced and danced and sang until the wedding party was done. And this is where my story ends. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Poor Cobbler and the King of the Winds. There was once a poor cobbler who toiled all day and all night and had more children than there are holes in a sieve. One day he mended the shoes of a miller, who paid him with flour, and he was carrying the flour home when the wind blew all the flour away. "Well, that's too much. I'll go and find the King of the Winds to let him know it was heartless to take that sack of flour away from me." He made his way through many lands until he arrived at a beautiful meadow. There he saw a whirlwind approaching that blew the dust from the road up into a spiralling cloud, and the poor cobbler was so very afraid that he took his hat off and lay flat on the ground to save himself from the raging wind. "You are wise to recognize and bow down before my power," said the King of the Winds, "or else you would have fared much worse. Tell me, what brings you to this distant place?" "I came for compensation from you, Your Majesty. The other day I was paid a sack of flour, and I was just carrying it home when a youthful breeze blew it clean out of my hands, and now my family have no food to eat." "Leave that to me. That wicked wind will suffer for its deeds, but I will not let you suffer any longer." So the king led the poor cobbler into his palace, where he fed him and gave him a magical lamb. Then he said, "When you arrive home, simply say, 'Shake yourself, O lamb,' and the lamb will shake off enough money to keep you for a month. But beware not to try this before you arrive home." The poor cobbler took leave from the King of the Winds and left for home. But his curiosity overcame him, and he simply had to see what the little lamb could do. As soon as he uttered the word of command, the ground around the lamb was showered with gold coins. He soon reached his lodgings for the night in the house of a very old friend, and he warned his friend never to say, "Shake yourself, O lamb." But the poor cobbler had hardly fallen asleep when his host and his wife ordered the beast, "Shake yourself, O lamb." When they saw the gold coins scatter on the ground, they took the animal and replaced it with a lamb from their own flock. The poor cobbler woke the next morning, but failed to notice the change. He thanked the man and his wife and left for home with high hopes in his heart. When he eventually arrived back, he said, "Shake yourself, O lamb." He repeated the order a number of times, but the little lamb simply stood and stared back at him. The cobbler then set off again to visit the King of the Winds, and he was very angry. He marched straight to the palace to voice his complaint. "I am sure you did not take my advice, and you must have spoken to the lamb before you reached home. But this time I will give you a tablecloth, and all you have to say is, 'Fill yourself with fine fare, O tablecloth,' and it will be covered in food. But do not be tempted to try this before you arrive home." But the poor cobbler was too curious again, and he tried the tablecloth. When evening came, he took lodging with his friend again, and he said to him, "You mustn't tell my tablecloth to fill itself with fine fare." The friend and his wife could hardly wait for the cobbler to sleep that night. They gave the order at once, and when they found out what a valuable tablecloth he had, they exchanged it for one of their own. The next day he arrived home and became terribly angry when he ordered the tablecloth again and again, but nothing happened. Again the poor cobbler travelled hastily back to see the King of the Winds, who was waiting for him when he arrived, and presented him with a small cane. He told him he should not tell the cane to "Turn around cleverly, O cane," before he arrived home again. The poor cobbler could barely wait to find out what the cane would do, and so he quickly said, "Turn around cleverly, O cane." The cane hopped up and began to beat him hard. The poor cobbler cried out in pain, "Stop!" and the clever cane stopped beating him at once. Now the poor cobbler knew what to do with the cane. On his way home, he stayed with his old friend again. He warned the man and his wife not to say, "Turn around cleverly, O cane." But his wife's friend woke her husband at midnight. They took the cane into their room and she said, "Turn around cleverly, O cane, once for me and once for my husband." The poor cobbler was quickly woken by their cries. "I told you not to address my cane, but it seems that you are the guilty one, so let it beat you as it will." "Oh, we promised to return both the lamb and the tablecloth." Then the poor cobbler ordered the cane to stop. But the friend and his wife did not wait for the cane to beat them again, and they hurried forth with the poor cobbler's lamb and his tablecloth, who took them home to his family, who never wanted for money or food again. And they all lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Fox Princess. Once upon a time there was an old king, and he had 3 sons. The king was so old that he could not leave his castle, and so he had a church built in the grounds where he could pray. On the day that the church was at last complete, a bird began to sing on top of its tower. When the king heard the bird's song, he suddenly became a young man once more, and he ordered his sons to catch the bird. The eldest son climbed to the top of the tower, but as soon as he reached out to catch the bird, it flew away. The prince watched the bird as it flew, and he saw it land in a nearby forest. "Father, I saw where the bird flew. I shall pursue it. Godspeed, my son, and return with the bird as soon as you can." The young prince arrived at the forest as the sun began to set. He made a fire and ate his supper. Then he saw a fox. "Go, dog, and catch that fox." The fox stood and commanded, "May you and your dog turn to stone." So that is what happened. The next morning, the middle son climbed to the tower to catch the bird. He saw the same thing that his brother had seen, and as he came down from the tower, he said, "I too shall follow the bird." He reached the forest by sunset and also sat and ate his supper, and as he ate, he saw the fox. "Go, dog, and catch that fox." The fox stood and commanded, "May you and your dog turn to stone." On the third morning, the bird sang again, and so the youngest prince climbed the tower, but the bird flew away once more. The youngest son saw the same forest that his brothers had seen. He also followed the bird's flight and arrived at the forest as the sun was setting. He also made a fire and sat and ate his supper. Then he saw the fox. "Fine fox, do not bark. Come and share my food instead." "I would join you with pleasure, but I am afraid of your dog." "Don't be afraid. I shall tie it to a tree." "Prince, do you think the bird is in this tree?" "That's what I think. I saw it fly right here." "But that is not so. The bird is very far away, and don't be sad because we shall catch it." "The bird is in the land of the Red King, and that is 7 lands away. There is a pear tree in the garden of the king, and in that tree there is a hollow, and in that hollow lives the bird." Then the fox turned into a fine young man, and the two of them set forth. After many days and nights, they arrived at the city where the Red King lived. And as they approached the royal garden, the fox said, "This is the pear tree, Prince. It won't be hard to catch the bird, but there is one difficulty. As you climb down the tree, try not to bite a pear because the tree will make such a noise that it will wake all the guards in the royal palace." As the prince climbed back down the tree, he took a breath and opened his mouth so wide that a pear popped between his teeth and he bit on it by chance. The guards ran to the garden and caught the young prince. The Red King said, "I see you are a prince. I should have you executed, but I will spare your life on one condition." "What would that be?" "There is a beautiful palace on the shores of the Red Sea. In that palace lives a beautiful princess. If you bring her here, I will pardon you. I have one life, I have one death. I shall do my best." "Again you took a difficult task. I won't let you do it alone. I shall take the task myself because you were good to me, unlike your brothers." The prince and the fox journeyed on and soon reached the shores of the Red Sea. The fox tore off a gigantic leaf and shaped it into a boat with oars. Then they sat in the boat and crossed the sea. And as they reached the far side of the sea, the fox kicked the boat and it turned into a pair of golden shoes, and the fox turned into an old cobbler with a long white beard. The fox then walked to and fro in front of the beautiful palace with the golden shoes in his hands. The princess shouted down to him, "Poor cobbler, bring those golden shoes to me and I shall buy them." "I'm sorry, your highness, but I am very old and cannot climb stairs. Would you be so kind and come down to try them on?" So the princess ran down to try on the shoes. They fit her beautiful feet perfectly. Then the old man shouted, "Little shoes, take all 3 of us to where we want to be." And they found themselves back on the far side of the sea in a flash. Then he asked the princess, "Tell me, do you know the Red King, as we came here to take you there?" "Of course I know him. I shall never marry him. I would rather die." "What would you say to the prince, your majesty?" "I should like to marry him even though he had me kidnapped." "Worry not, princess. You shall marry him and I shall marry the Red King." When they arrived back in the Red King's city, the fox did a somersault and changed into a pretty princess, much like the other. When the Red King saw the princess, he was delighted. He gathered all his ministers and friends and began to prepare for a wedding feast. And as they were sitting around the table, one of the wedding guests said, "This princess is perfect, except for one fault." Other asked, "And what is that?" The gentleman replied, "Why, she has the eyes of a fox." What girl would not be ashamed when someone says she has the eyes of a fox? The bride hid under the table, did a somersault, and turned back into the fox and ran out of the room in the greatest of haste. By the time the guests came to their senses, the fox was far, far away. The three of them continued their journey home, and as they passed the forest, they saw the place where the prince had given supper to the fox. Here the fox jumped down and said, "Do you see these figures of stone? They are your brothers, and these are their horses. How did they come to be here? They set their dogs on me, and so I turned them to stone. Would you like me to turn them back again?" "Of course I would. Every man loves his brothers." "Very well, I will turn them back, but you may be sorry I did." The fox then walked over and patted the stone statues. "Rise up and live once more." Both of them stood up, and the fox said, "Well, dear prince, I shall travel no further with you." They bid farewell to each other, and the fox left. The four of them travelled home together, but they soon began to quarrel. Was it fair the youngest son should marry first? So the two princes decided to kill their youngest brother. The eldest prince cut off his head with his sword. The fox knew this would happen, and it ran to find the head a distance from the body. It ran hither and thither and saw a snake with leaves in its mouth. "Hey, snake, give those leaves to me." "I will not. It took me 7 long years to find them." The fox stamped on the snake's tail, and it dropped the leaves on the ground. The fox picked the leaves up and ran to the prince. It rubbed the leaves on the prince's neck and put his head back in its proper place. The prince opened his eyes. "Oh, what a deep sleep I had. You fell asleep for eternity, but I saved your life. I told you your brothers would kill you and rob you of your wife. Take better care in the future. Godspeed." And then the fox vanished. The boy arrived home to his father with a little bird in his shirt. He placed the bird on top of the clock. The bird began to sing a beautiful tune, and the old king sprang to his feet like a young man once more. "Who brought this bird to me?" "It was me, father," said the youngest one. "What should I do with your troublesome brothers?" "Your Majesty, dear father, give them money and horses and let them go on their way. I never want to see them here again." And the two princes were banished from the land. The youngest prince married his beautiful bride, and they both lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Horse Egg. There once lived a peasant who found a giant pumpkin in the meadow. What on earth could this be, he thought. So he bent down, lifted the giant pumpkin up, felt it and smelt it, but he still had no clue what it was. So he took the pumpkin to the village council. The councillors were in the middle of an important meeting when the farmer walked in and plonked the giant pumpkin on the table. And this surprised them all. "I have lived a very long life, but I have never seen anything like that before. I have experienced a lot in my life, but I have never come across anything like that before. And I'm not a young man either, but I really couldn't tell you what on earth that is." Then the village mayor added wisely, "Gentlemen, this peculiar object, judging by its shape, cannot be anything else but an egg." Of course, what else could it be? It must be an egg. The peasant agreed and added that the egg-like object had been warm when he first found it. The local mayor had a very clever mind, and so he wanted to know exactly what kind of egg this might be. The old village leaders thought it could possibly be a terrible green dragon's egg. However, the mayor was inclined to agree with a farmer who said that he had recently seen a strange horse in the very same meadow. The village leaders liked the sound of this and said, "It must be so. Nothing other than a horse could have laid such a giant egg." "Good. So tell me, my friends, what should we do next?" "Why, you must catch it, of course." "Yes, but what animal could do it?" "All horses don't lay eggs, so they could never hatch it." Everyone thought hard what to do. But then the mayor had an idea. "Gentlemen of the council, if the local horses are too stupid to hatch an egg, then we, the village council, should do it. We, gentlemen, must hatch the giant egg. That's what I say." This sounded like a wonderful idea, and everyone nodded in agreement. The village mayor decided to set an example, and so he was the first to sit on the giant egg, and then the gentlemen of the council followed one after the other. And they would all be still sitting on it today if the people in the next village had not spread the rumour that it had gone bad under their bottoms. When they heard this, the local leaders protested and refused to sit on the egg for a day longer. This made the mayor very sad because he said he was sure he had felt the horse moving inside it. But the village leaders were convinced the egg was rotten and it smelled very bad. But each stuck to their own side of the story. In the end, the council voted and decided to take the egg to the top of a hill and roll it down onto the people of the village below who had teased them so. The men, women and children of the village all walked up to the top of a nearby hill and prepared to punish their neighbours with the stinking egg. Everyone pinched their noses and the mayor began to roll the egg. And the giant egg rolled down and rolled down the hill until it rolled into the bushes at the bottom. This is where it broke in two, just as a rabbit ran out of the bushes. and all the villagers cried out, "There goes the horse! Come on, let's catch it!" And they all gave chase to the rabbit. Only the mayor stayed standing on top of the hill and muttered sadly to himself, "I told them that something was moving inside. We should have had the patience to sit on the egg for another day, and it would have grown into a fine, strong horse."